That way of measuring progress actually excludes most of women's work around the world, because most work done by women around the world still today is unpaid. It's hard labor, it's productive work, it creates tremendous benefit, but it's ignored in our measures of progress. Why? Because our gross domestic product only counts money that's actually spent. In other words, if you hire someone to look after your child, if you have a stranger look after your child, then the gross domestic product goes up. If you look after your own child, it counts for nothing. It's invisible. So in a nutshell, just to really boil it down, why do measurements of progress matter? Well, they matter a lot because they determine what makes it and what doesn't make it onto the agenda of policymakers, what gets attention and what doesn't get attention. If you count it, policymakers pay attention. If it's not measured, then it's ignored. So it actually really affects the way policy is made. It influences our lives very, very directly. And the way we currently measure our progress, according to whether the economy is growing or not, is very narrow and can be quite deceptive.
Hi, this is Bruce Lipton, and you're listening to Green Planet FM.
Kia ora, greetings, and welcome to Green Planet FM 104.6. I'm Tim Lynch, and I trust that you are doing well. I invite you to stay with me over the next hour as we discuss and find ways to take care of our unique and magnificent green planet Earth. Senator Robert Kennedy in 1968 said gross national product includes air pollution and ambulances to clear our highways from carnage. It counts special locks on our doors and jails for people who break them. It grows with the production of napalm and missiles and nuclear warheads. It includes the broadcasting of television programs which glorify violence to sell goods to our children. But there's much that it does not comprehend. It does not allow the health of our families, the quality of their education, or the joy of their play. It is indifferent to the decency of our factories and the safety of our streets alike. On the phone from North India at the base of the Himalayas, I have Ron Coleman. He's originally from Canada, and he has been very much instrumental in looking at what genuine progress indicators are in comparison to gross domestic product. And I'm just going to go straight into this. Kia ora, Ron. Thank you very much for wanting to come and share with New Zealanders this very unique perspective on economics. So, g'day and thank you.
Very good. I'm happy to be back with a New Zealander. I spent some wonderful time in New Zealand on this very project, so delighted to be back with you.
Thank you, Ron. I was there on numerous occasions, or I think 2 occasions when you were in New Zealand. Dave Brewer in A New New Zealand was very keen to get this concept across, and in the late, I think 2008, 2009, the New Zealand government showed a keen interest, particularly Michael Cullen, the Minister of Finance, the minister who was involved in all things money, and also that Treasury here too were interested in what it may be able to offer. So can you tell us, what is a genuine progress indicator?
Okay. I would first say just about New Zealand that I was very impressed at the time, and the reason I came back several years in a row when I was invited there was because the thinking there was very forward-looking on this, and I have to say maybe it has to do with being geographically a little bit out of the mainstream, but there's something about the thinking of New Zealanders on this subject that I found very refreshing. And actually, at the time, I was delighted and surprised the Maori Party even adopted this as part of its platform. So it somehow resonated there, and there was certainly a lot of interest at the ministerial level. So when you asked me to come on to do this, I was pleased because it brought alive again all those memories of New Zealanders having a very fresh and open approach to something which is quite radical, but I think absolutely necessary for this world. So in a nutshell, just to really boil it down, why do measurements of progress matter? Well, they matter a lot because they determine what makes it and what doesn't make it onto the agenda of policymakers, what gets attention and what doesn't get attention. If you count it, policymakers pay attention. If it's not measured, then it's ignored. So it actually really affects the way policy is made. It influences our lives very, very directly. And the way we currently measure our progress, according to whether the economy is growing or not, is very narrow and can be quite deceptive. It doesn't tell us much about our well-being. The fact that the economy is or isn't growing at a certain pace doesn't tell us about our quality of life. It tells us nothing about the quality of the environment. It tells us nothing about the health of the population. It tells us nothing about our education, about the strength of our communities. The things that really constitute our quality of life, our well-being, are simply sidelined or ignored in these conventional measures of progress. So long as we're making more stuff and selling more stuff and buying more stuff, the economy will continue to grow. But that's not necessarily good for our lives and for the environment. So the more fossil fuels you burn, the more the economy will grow. The more cigarettes you sell, the more junk food you sell, the more the economy will grow. Even war is good for the economy. Even natural disasters are good for the economy. As long as you're spending money on all the repair and damage after, let's say, the earthquake in Christchurch, all the money spent repairing that damage makes the economy grow. So even environmental catastrophes, war, sickness, pollution, anything can make the economy grow. Some things are good, some things are bad. But our current measures of economic growth, namely what we call gross domestic product, make no distinction between what's good for us and what's harmful to us. So that's the basic flaw in the way we currently measure our progress. And in a nutshell, literally in a sentence, all that our genuine progress index does is it simply corrects that imbalance by measuring what matters to us, by measuring what really counts in our lives. It includes the quality of the environment. It includes our health, our communities, our education. It includes all of those things. And, of course, it also includes economic security. So we're not excluding any of the economic factors, but we're simply looking at all of the factors in a bigger and more comprehensive way to assess how we're really doing. In a nutshell, that's the difference.
Thank you very much, Ron. Yes, well, what hit me when you were in New Zealand, it was like car crashes and the resultant injuries to people and the loss around the so many car crashes that we have in New Zealand, and then the hospital costs. And then if a house burns down, or if there's burglaries, and it goes on, and I can see what the pollution is, that when pollution is the cost of the pollution, but then the cost of cleaning it up, which could actually be 10 times worse than the initial pollution if you actually let it go and continue. So I ended up also working in the top security prison for a wee while, doing literacy and numeracy with all the prisoners. And I realised such a huge amount of New Zealanders are in jail at the moment. We are the second highest per head of population of having inmates in jail, and this is a huge cost because they've got children and they've got wives or de facto partners who have got no breadwinner for them. And then I used to see all the problems of going to court and having the lawyers come in. This was a huge cost on the country, and we need to be able to find a way with bringing human beings into the world. But that's another story. Ron, This is fantastic. So I'd like you to carry on now. What are the current challenges around people, countries accepting genuine progress indicators?
Well, let me first comment on what you just were talking about. So in the Genuine Progress Index, we count positive and negative things very, very based on all the existing evidence we can bring together. So as examples of what you mentioned, we count crime as a cost to the economy rather than a benefit to the economy. So we actually tabulate victim losses, exactly the things you described, the cost of keeping a prisoner for a year, of maintaining the prisons, the court system. So if there's a reduction in crime, that shows up as a benefit in the Genuine Progress Index. So it's interesting that whereas the gross domestic product, the GDP, our normal way of measuring progress, whatever money you spend counts as a benefit. So the economy will grow regardless if it's on education or if it's on prisons, if it's on war, or if it's on benefiting someone's health or literacy programs. They're equal. But in the Genuine Progress Index, we distinguish those things. So when we tabulate the costs of crime, that is literally a deduction. We count that as, we call it, the costs of crime, as opposed to benefits. When we look at you gave the example of car crashes, so we have a whole set of research work on what are the true costs of transportation, what are the costs of driving, and we include the costs of burning fossil fuels, of greenhouse gas emissions, of air pollution. So those need to be part of the equation of driving. If we're going to ever make a case for greater fuel efficiency, for reducing greenhouse gas emissions, then we have to be able to show the true costs to the economy of burning fossil fuels versus limiting fossil fuels. And by the way, I want to say that we're not alone and out on a limb here. The former head of the World Bank, the chief economist of the World Bank, Lord Nicholas Stern, did an extraordinary report for the British government on the true costs of climate change. And he worked out that every dollar spent on reducing greenhouse gas emissions will save between $5 and $20 in economic costs down the road.
Yes.
But the costs of continuing business as usual are much greater than the costs of actually reducing our greenhouse gas emissions now. And this is a top economist, one of the world's best economists, calculated this in economic language, which of course is very powerful. We're not talking about just an environmental tree hugger here.
Yes.
We're talking about former chief economist of the World Bank. So this understanding that we need to look at things more realistically, given the knowledge we have today, is actually gaining a foothold even among the most respectable economic circles. So that also begins to answer your second question, that maybe when we started this work more than 20 years ago, yes, we were a bit out on a limb, and what we were saying was regarded as a little bit odd and unusual because it so went against the mainstream of the way things are done. But more and more, this understanding of how we need to measure progress is gradually coming into the mainstream, which is very satisfying. The European Union now has, and also the OECD, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, which is the organization of all the so-called developed countries in the world, now have indicators that say they are going beyond GDP. So it's very encouraging that this understanding is now challenging our conventional way of doing things. And again, I'm pleased that the work that New Zealand has done in this area is somewhat on the cutting edge, is on the leading edge of this work that's being more and more accepted.
I'm pleased to hear that, because I do actually see New Zealand's mentioned here in Wiki. There was in 2005 to 2013, there was a study, and there was also an earlier study as well, and That was back in, there's one for 2005 and 2008 by Philip Lawn and Matthew Clark. They produced a book. And so there has been a few people out there, but
Oh, yeah, and by the way, it was a New Zealander, I really want to give credit here, who in a way got the ball rolling with this way back. It was Marilyn Waring, who actually produced an extraordinary critique of the gross domestic product, of the conventional way of measuring progress, which showed brilliantly that that way of measuring progress actually excludes most of women's work around the world, because most work done by women around the world still today is unpaid. It's hard labor, it's productive work, it creates tremendous benefit, but it's ignored in our measures of progress. Why? Because our gross domestic product only counts money that's actually spent. In other words, if you hire someone to look after your child, if you have a stranger look after your child, then the gross domestic product goes up. If you look after your own child, it counts for nothing. It's invisible. So much of crucial work that women do around the world, their unpaid work on farms, their farm labor that's very often contributes to the family livelihood, that's not done for pay, is ignored. So Marilyn was one of the pioneers in this critique of the conventional ways of measuring progress and opening the door to new methods. And then I have to really compliment, back in the 1990s, early 2000s, your Ministry for Social Development in New Zealand did some wonderful work on annual reports on social well-being. Statistics New Zealand did a superb report on measuring not just our financial capital, but also our natural capital, the value of our forests, the value of our fisheries, our social capital, our health and our education. So you have actually done wonderful work in New Zealand, and Wellington Regional Council actually has adopted a genuine progress index for its own work, which was also very satisfying. So really, New Zealand has been on the cutting edge of this work, which is now becoming more and more understood as essential.
Thank you very much for that, Ron. Yes, I remember it was at Massey University here in Albany. I think you spoke, and Marilyn Waring was there too. And yes, she has actually been very, very proactive on many, many levels, particularly in relationship to the people who are in a lower socio-economic situation as of today. So, yeah, well, I'm glad...
I'm going to add one other thing about New Zealand here. I think that's really important. This way of looking at the world that we're talking about, maybe the word that might describe it is holistic. We don't look at the economy as if it's separate from the quality of our environment, from the quality of our communities, from our unpaid work, from our education, our literacy. We look at our well-being as a whole, in the big picture. So very often that way of looking at things, instead of carving out the economy as if it's a separate little box, which it's not, we look at it holistically. So I want to give special credit here, because for indigenous peoples, like the Maori, this way of looking at the world comes naturally, in terms of living in harmony with the natural world, of respecting the natural environment, not simply exploiting it for its natural resources, but actually respecting the quality of our forests, our waterways, and so forth. So I have to say that one of the most heartening things was the way that Maori community and Maori leaders just intuitively understood the basic view, the basic way of looking at the world like this. So I think the fact that New Zealand has a strong indigenous culture, much stronger, for example, than remains in Australia, United States, Canada, other parts of the world where the indigenous population no longer has that strength. I think the fact that New Zealand has been fortunate enough to have a strong indigenous cultural population and presence really has given fire to this type of work because it somehow intuitively lands in Maori way of looking at the world.
Thank you, Ron. This is extremely important because Maori always have. I'm part Maori myself, and I understand that Papatuanuku, Mother Earth, is their great sustainer or our great sustainer. And Maori intuitively know that she lends us a body. She lends us free air, free rainwater, and until recently a free food chain. And Maori, who I've always related to well, believe in an integrated whole, interconnection, interrelationships with something greater. And they've just had a major river here redesignated as a living entity. So there is a whole lot of progress, indicators coming out about the fact how we see the whole planetary biosphere and everything that works within it as integrated, levels within levels within levels, or tightly coupled relationships. So thank you for...
Yeah, now the challenge is, for us in our conventional way of doing things, is those... It's very interesting you use those words there, and you just said free water, free earth, free resources, and the problem is that we've taken that free way too much for granted. So because it's free, and because therefore it doesn't show up in our conventional measures of progress, we have somehow assumed that we could exploit it forever. So one of the things that the Genuine Progress does very explicitly, it gives a value. And in some way I'm embarrassed to say it, but we have to do this in order for it to get the attention of policymakers. But we go so far, wherever possible, to actually demonstrate the economic value of our natural world. We have to do that to catch the attention of policymakers. Let me give you one example that we found with our work in Canada. In our particular province, in Nova Scotia, in eastern Canada, I was good friends with the fellow in the 1990s who was in charge of tobacco control, and he was pulling his hair out in frustration because he said, in order to get a decent tobacco control policy in place, I need around the table the finance minister, because we've got to talk about taxes. I need around the table the education minister, because we've got to talk about school-based smoking prevention programs. I need the Minister for Tourism here, because we've got to talk about smoke-free restaurants and smoke-free hotels. And he said, but they all think that this is just a health department issue. So here I am stuck there, and we can never get a good comprehensive tobacco control policy in place because we've divided up our world into these boxes, because we don't have that holistic view. Each little department has its own budget and its own agenda. But when we came with our Genuine Progress Index, and we actually demonstrated in dollar figures, smoking costs the province of Nova Scotia $170 million a year, that we could actually save 1/4 of our provincial health care budget if Nova Scotians didn't smoke, had healthy weights, and exercised regularly. So just those three factors alone would so reduce the rate of diabetes 2, of heart disease, of hypertension, of colon cancer, that the health budget would drop. And suddenly, the finance minister got interested. So here he was thinking that all this was none of his business. But the moment you put a dollar figure to it, see, it's sad that we have to do this. I wish we had the Maori view of respecting it, even when it's so-called free. But when our conventional modern world regards something as free, it simply takes it for granted. So in the Genuine Progress, we have to show the economic benefits and the economic costs of what we've conventionally regarded as free in order to get the attention of the Treasury, the Finance Minister, the Economics Ministry, and so forth. So that's one of the strategies that we use in the Genuine Progress Index.
Yes, thank you very much again, because it's very clear we're dealing with compartmentalization versus holism. And a lot of business and banking in particular, they're all locked down into compartments, and nobody knows what's happening in another compartment or department within that industry. And so, yes, we have to be able to become far more fluid in seeing the interrelationship of all things. So am I able to go back to that terrible question about what are the challenges that we face?
Yes. Okay. So, Tim, I would say there are two real challenges here, and one's a big one and one's a strategic one. So, first of all, this is, I don't know what the right word is, it's radical. It's a different way of looking at the economy. It's a different way of looking at the world. And this is, in a way, changing our measures of progress is the thin edge of the wedge to something that's much bigger. If we're going to save our planet, if our children are going to have a future to inherit, and our grandchildren, then we have no choice but to change our lifestyles somewhat dramatically. We are using up resources in the world at a much faster rate than they can be replenished. There's a group called the Global Footprint Network, which every year measures at what point in the year we literally run out of resources, when we are, how to put it, living off our capital, where we're actually depleting our reserves, when we're actually getting to the point where we're going to leave a poorer future for our children. Now, this is not theoretical. Scientists predict that at the current rate of climate change and global warming, Bangkok will be underwater in 15 years from now. That our grandchildren will see London, England, underwater. I mean, the rate of change that we're witnessing is quite terrifying. And so the reality is that we can no longer live at the expense of future generations. We have to start taking a long-term view. Now, the Genuine Progress Index makes no sense in the short term. Everything about the GDP, the gross domestic product, is short-term. Did it go up or down in the last quarter? If it went down for 2 quarters in a row, the economists are tearing their hair out, calling that a recession. You know, in other words, it's a very short-term way of thinking. But adopting a Genuine Progress Index is, in a way, a kind of key to changing the entire way we look at our economy, our well-being, our quality of life. And this is also where it comes up against barriers, because people are happy to talk about this in theory, but how ready are people to make the necessary, okay, I'll use the word sacrifices, maybe being willing to switch more to modes of mass transportation rather than everybody driving their own car, and gas-guzzling ones at that. So how willing are we to make the changes in our lifestyle necessary? Now, this way, the Genuine Progress Index way of looking at the economy opens up the doorway to policymakers needing to make the necessary changes. Once you identify where the true costs and the true benefits are, then what do? You give tax benefits to what creates a brighter future.
Excellent.
And you penalize what creates a darker future. So, for example, now Denmark was on the leading edge of this. Denmark was smart enough 25, 30 years ago to invest in renewable energy, in wind energy. It looked to the future and it said, oh, the future is not in fossil fuels, it's in renewable energy. And now the Danish wind turbine industry is one of the leading ones in the whole world because of that foresight, because of that investment. So we have to make quite radical changes to our way of looking at things, our lifestyle, and that's also one of the challenges. So are we really willing to take the bull by the horns and say, are we willing to live in such a way that we'll leave the earth in at least as good shape for our children as we found it? That's number one. The second big challenge is a more strategic one. earlier on, I was maybe being a little glib in saying, yes, this is coming into the mainstream. And in some way it is. I'm happy to see that. But so far, that work has only been indicators. Most of that work has not yet bitten off the hard part, which we call full cost accounting. What are the true costs to the economy? So in other words, it hasn't yet started to calculate costs and benefits in economic terms. And so long as our measurement people avoid that, so long as we stick just to indicators alone, the GDP will continue sailing down the superhighway while we're paving the side streets with nice little environmental and social indicators, if you get my drift. In other words,
yes,
we'll have good indicators, and I never want to put that work down. It's wonderful work. Work that the Ministry of Social Development did, so good. It's important, but unless we use those measures to actually look, okay, I'm going to go on a little bit here because this is really important to understand. GDP is not an indicator. It's an accounting system. It's the way we count the health of the economy. It's a balance sheet. So unless we turn our indicators into accounts, unless we actually take issue with the present accounting system, which is GDP, in other words, unless we actually count up the costs of crime, the costs of pollution, the costs of resource pollution, resource depletion, the true costs of transportation, unless we actually include that in our economic measurements, we'll never really be challenging GDP. So I would say that's the second big challenge that we're facing so far. We have to enter that realm, be willing to bite off, in addition to our indicators, we have to bite off what we call full benefit cost accounting, accounting for the true benefits and costs of our economic activity.
I'm speaking with Ron Coleman from Canada regarding genuine progress indexes or indicators. Very good. Now, have we the will? Are you there?
Yep, I'm here.
Yeah. Have we the will to do this?
Yeah, well, well, that's what they call what they always call the $64,000 question, isn't it?
The elephant in the room.
Really, that's the big question. Now, there are cases. Look, if I think, who are the, if I look back at shining examples of leadership, well, the mayor of Curitiba, a Brazilian city,
yes,
he was an extraordinary mayor,
yes,
and he was far-sighted enough to create a whole mass transit city. He constructed that city so that mass transit would be efficient, effective, it would work, cost-effective, and even plants were converted from making autos to making really good buses. So Curitiba today is an example of political will that really took the bull by the horns and actually made something happen, made change happen. If I think of someone like, well, if I think of leaders like Nelson Mandela and F.W. de Klerk in South Africa, that was courageous change that they made. Here was a system of apartheid, and they had to look into the future, and they had to say, this is not going to work. And they had to be willing to take that system apart. I mean, it takes that kind of courage, that kind of political will. We've seen it. I mean, we've had examples of it in the world. We've seen someone like Gorbachev who had the courage to say, look, this system is not working. We've got to open it up. So the examples we've seen are examples of tremendous courage, of willingness to take a step into the unknown, to take some risk, to say, look, we know what the right direction is. It's not going to be smooth sailing. It's not always going to be easy. There are going to be challenges, but the current way of doing business is leading us to catastrophe. We can't keep going the way we are. Scientists keep telling us this day after day, that our current trajectory is leading to a world that I'm afraid for my daughter. I have to say that honestly, that I don't know about the world she's inheriting. I mean, here I am in India, and I don't know if you have any idea what off-the-charts pollution can actually look like and feel like. It is terrifying when the pollution levels are so high that the charts no longer register. It's beyond the hazardous range. Now they have in Delhi 50% of lung cancer cases are no longer related to smoking, when the traditional figures were 90% are related to smoking. So, I mean, the West has exported a lot of its dirty industry to Asia, so now the pollution is here. But, you know, the current direction in which we're moving in terms of global warming, resource depletion, breakup of communities, you talked about high rates of imprisonment in New Zealand. This is not the kind of future we want to leave our children. So it's not different from looking apartheid in the face. It's not different from looking at the old Soviet system in the face and saying, this doesn't work anymore. We've got to do something different here. So it's a big challenge, and your question about political will is, I don't know. It's got to manifest at election time. It's got to manifest in the agendas of political parties. Political parties have to be brave enough to go to the polls and say, this is the future we stand for. This is how we want our contribution in the next 4 years to be assessed by our children and our grandchildren. Not just looking ahead at what's going to get us reelected, but really beginning to think long term. So political will is where it's at, and I would say citizens can't fob that responsibility off onto leaders. I mean, we, in our lifestyles, are responsible for the leaders we get. So I think that all of us have to take that responsibility in our own hands.
Yes, thank you. Is there, Ron, a small state in America or any other country that you have been invited to or that you know of really wanting to commit? What's happening in Bhutan? I mean, they've worked it all out. They have got an index for happiness. I mean, this is something we definitely need as well to integrate this into this whole progress indicator, because if we're not happy, then we really have to have a look at ourselves.
Well, I mean, I lived for 7 years full-time in Bhutan and another 5.5 years part-time. In fact, while I was going back and forwards to Bhutan every year in the early 2000s, it was the same time I was also visiting New Zealand, and exactly for this reason. So Bhutan is an interesting case because 35 years ago, the king of Bhutan actually made this now famous statement in which he said, gross national happiness is more important than gross national product. So Bhutan did have the political will. It created a set of measures based on 4 pillars: environmental conservation, equitable and sustainable economic development, cultural promotion, and good governance. And they were all supposed to work together. And so the government of Bhutan actually adopted that as its framework for development and was very inspiring. And they had invited me there to work with them on their measures of progress, and I did work for many years with them. Now, again, I'll be honest with you, it's come up against very powerful vested interests, Tim, and it's sad. Bhutan tried to take this initiative to the United Nations and actually said, in April 2012, Bhutan hosted a big meeting at the United Nations where the Secretary General of the United Nations was there, the President of Costa Rica came, Nobel Prize-winning economists and religious leaders from around the world, 800 top people from politics, the diplomatic world, United Nations, government. came together, and this was at Bhutan's initiative, to adopt a new economic paradigm. So this was actually a big initiative and very, very hopeful at the time. But then along came the World Bank and said, well, what do you mean by new, you want a new Bretton Woods? So I don't think you should use that kind of language, because after all, World Bank was created at Bretton Woods in 1946. That was the moment when our present economic system was established in the way it currently is. So, then Bhutan's big and powerful neighbor, India, was also not so happy that Bhutan was going its own way and saying we need to wean ourselves off fossil fuels, because fossil fuels are actually the driving force of the Indian economy and Indian growth. So all kinds of, as soon as this started getting serious, the moment Bhutan took it to a level where it looked like it was really getting some attention, then the interests, both at the national and international and economic level, stepped in and said, well, this is too challenging to the way we currently do business. I'll give you one more example, Tim, from our own work. We did work on our forests in Nova Scotia, Canada, and the vast majority, about 95% of our harvesting of forests is by clear cutting in Nova Scotia. It's not selection harvesting. It's taking down large swaths of trees at once. We've lost 99.5% of our old growth forest is gone, irreparably lost. And we looked at the impact of that on the value of the timber, on the value of the forest. We did an economic analysis, and we said our Nova Scotia forests are depreciating in value. Now, I have to tell you honestly, the forest industry was not happy with our report.
Yes.
They said, because this challenged their way of doing business. So this is why your question about will is very important, because this way of looking at measuring progress, looking at the economy realistically, does challenge vested interests. It challenges the way we currently do business. It challenges a lot of elements of our current lifestyle that we don't question. At a very practical level, can we start to look at, are we willing to look at what's the true costs of sugared sodas and junk food on our long-term children's health? Are we willing to factor that into our economic calculations? What's the true cost of consuming 3 cans of Coke a week on our children's health 10, 15, 20 years down the road? It's going to take a change in mindset. Now, the Genuine Progress Index, this way of measuring progress, is going to trigger those kinds of questions. It can't avoid them. It's geared to doing it. It's geared to asking uncomfortable questions about our lifestyle, and it's going to challenge some of the ways we currently do business. So I just want to be very blunt. I don't have any, I should say this honestly, I used to have more roses in my eyes, so to speak.
Yes.
I used to have greater, this, so long as we tell the truth, people will listen. I used to really believe that.
Yeah.
And I have to say that in 20 years in the School of Hard Knocks, I have to say that I can no longer say the truth will win. I wish I could. I said it for many, many years. So long as we tell the truth about the way the economy works, what's going on in our society, are we making genuine progress or not? Where are we making progress? Where aren't we making progress? Where are our strengths? Where are our weaknesses? That truth will speak. But what I've discovered is that it's tough out there, and it's going to bump up against strong interests that want to keep doing things the way we've always done.
Very much.
Okay, I've got to add one thing here. I know I'm talking too much.
That's
here.
okay. It's okay.
But one little thing I'll add is I don't want people to think that Genuine Progress Index is just going to give them bad news, That is really not true. On the contrary, it tells tremendous good news that we ignore. Because we count unpaid work, we give a value to unpaid work. We celebrate the work that volunteers do. The hard work that so many people do in their communities to improve community well-being, it's not paid, it's ignored, it's invisible in the economy, it exists nowhere in the GDP, but in our genuine progress index, we really acknowledge the value of that unpaid work, of women's work. We acknowledge the value of our natural world that we simply take for granted. We shine a spotlight on where our real strengths are. And here again, New Zealand has this extraordinary beauty and diversity. Unlike any place I've ever been in the world, New Zealand has remarkable natural, let's call it wealth. Let's use economic language. It is wealth. And let's really acknowledge that. So the Genuine Progress Index, it might tell the true costs of crime, greenhouse gas emissions, pollution, but it will also show the true value of what's really precious to us. So it's not a matter of favoring, when we talk about greenhouse gas emissions, people think, oh, this is just going to tell us bad news. Not so.
Good, yes. Well, you see, I think there's a number of contingencies here. At a very grassroots level, I've been spending a bit of time around the different communities up and down New Zealand, and we've got one specifically in Littleton. It's called Project Littleton, and they have a large time bank, and this time bank allows people to be able to share time. 1 hour of somebody's time is worth something to another person, and they can swap theirs. And time banking is very important in this particular area, and the Christchurch City Council now is really getting behind it for the whole of Christchurch City, because the people with no cash but they've got energy and skills, well, they can start working and sharing and cooperating
exactly.
Together. Now, this is really important, particularly from the standpoint of even volunteers now can actually be paid in time bank credits or given 1 hour for what they've volunteered to do. And so there's new things happening, Ron, that I feel are really, really potent. It's just a case of being able to get the information out to people, and there's numerous time banks over New Zealand, and the volunteers are a very important component of this. And then there's the other thing is, at the macro level, on a global scale, there has to be a shift in planetary consciousness. And this is the big one, because there's so much inertia, particularly when we acknowledge the fact that the media today is basically, it's a slugfest between competing viewpoints that always involve money and winners and losers. And nobody really in the greater press or greater media are calling out for a global, or I should say, a planetary discussion. We've got to have not a debate, we just have to address all the underlying things that you have stated. And yet when we look around, what leader in the world is standing up for it? Thus, it has to be at grassroots level, and I am really putting a lot of faith to empower the youth and the millennials, and especially women, because they know how to nurture.
Exactly. And I think that, what you just said is right on the button, because there is a tendency for us as ordinary citizens to somehow put all the responsibility on political parties and leaders and the world, and blame Donald Trump for everything. It's a natural tendency we have, but I think your question about political will applies at the most local level. In fact, in terms of quality of life, that's where the rubber hits the road. That's when people know if their lives are really getting better or not. So very, very realistically. So I think that bottom up and grassroots, I think we need to think of political will right at the grassroots level, and communities can take the future into their own hands. some of the most satisfying work I did in New Zealand was actually at the local level. There was a wonderful report that Manukau City Council issued, Tomorrow's Manukau, which has that bigger vision. And we worked with several municipal councils on measures of progress. And as I mentioned, Wellington was very, very receptive to this. And so I think you're quite right that ordinary New Zealanders don't have to wait for anybody in order to act and begin to, and also at the local level, there are no big barriers. Vested interests are not as prominent at the local level as they are at that national and international level. So it's easier to move forward with fewer challenges at that local community level.
I definitely agree. We've got the Manukau District Health Board over the last 9 years started off wanting to have 50 community gardens initiated, and what's happened, I think there's now 70 of them, and there's so many different people because there's a great number of nationalities now coming together, and they're growing these wonderful gardens. They're sharing. Most of the gardens naturally are organic, and the people are getting healthy. They're sharing different recipes. There's a great focus on what they're doing with their hands. They realise that they can start with some seeds, and 3 weeks to 2 months later, there's food bursting out of the ground. So it empowers them to realise that they can take control.
It's really wonderful, and that's actually empowering people at the most local grassroots level to really begin to change the future themselves without waiting for anybody. So that's wonderful to hear, and I also see more and more examples of that's where the change is going to start happening, and it'll be irresistible. I mean, in the end, the people at the national and international level will no longer be able to ignore this swell of grassroots activities. So I'm very happy to hear what you're talking about, and that's exactly the spirit that I felt coming to New Zealand back there in the early 2000s. That I think that if those communities can be like a little light bulb, a little spark for the rest of the country, I actually feel that New Zealand is one of those countries that can also be a spark and an inspiration for the rest of the world. In fact, it's more likely to come from a small place than one of the larger countries with greater vested interests. So the fact that New Zealand is a small country, I mean, just now, people got such inspiration around the world from seeing your Prime Minister continuing in office and having a baby at the same time. I mean, everyone around the world was inspired by that. So there are things that I think New Zealand can do as a country which can be a spark that lights a bigger fire of good progress, genuine progress around the world. So I've got tremendous hope that New Zealand is a place where this can really be nurtured and grow.
Well, we have a huge benefit. One, we're so isolated in the Southwest Pacific that we look out to the rest of the world and we see so many things happening in these countries, and we think to ourselves, well, can we do something better than this? And because New Zealand is situated as the closest major country to the international dateline, we see tomorrow first. And as a result, we are in many ways already in Tomorrowland because we're 2 hours ahead of Australia, 12 hours ahead of UK, and 16 hours ahead of the United States. So there is this incredible advantage. We're a nuclear-free country, and we still have to really hold that strongly. We are slowly becoming a GE-free country, and to be able to actually lock it in law, because no corporates, biotech companies can grow food in our country that's been manipulated by the DNA. So we are on a winner still there. So there's a very good chance, Ron, and I just want to say thank you so much for really empowering us and empowering me too, because I've want to hear that New Zealand has got this potential and this possibility, because at heart I've always thought that, but we need to have others from around the world pushing this too. Buckminster Fuller always said that New Zealand was the trim tab factor for our planet, and we trust that yes, This and Bucky was, very profound. And so in finalising, have you a little warm flurry that you'd like to share that you've experienced that will say, yes, the possibilities are still ripe?
Well, I would go further than that, and I would say there's actually no choice. That in order to, I know that these days we're fond of using fancy words like sustainability, but really we're just talking about what kind of world do we want to leave our children. And in a way it's choiceless. So I do feel, I completely am with you that New Zealand has the potential. If one country can actually show, oh, look, we're showing a different way forward, this works, that will have a powerful influence much beyond New Zealand's borders. And certainly New Zealand has all the potential to do that. So I would say it's not a matter of simply wishful thinking. It's not a matter of, it's actually showing what the actual way into the future is for the children of the world. So I want to thank you and all of your compatriots, and just wish and hope that you really realize the potential that's truly there.
Yes, thank you, Ron. GreenPlanetFM.com has got a huge database of so many different people like you who are here to be the change you want to see in the world. And I want to say thank you so much for taking the time to want to express how you feel, and also that genuine progress indicators can make a major impetus for this country and be taken on by New Zealand and be another shift in the global economy.
Thank you, Tim. It's a delight being back with you there.
Okay, well, thank you once again. Catch you soon, I trust.
Okay. Take care. Bye-bye.
Very good, Ron. Thank you, Ron. I was a little bit of a cowboy. Now, you said that Bangkok was going to be underwater by 2033 or in 15 years' time.
Yeah, that's what they're predicting. Yeah, now they're of course they're busy, and again, of course, they're spending huge amounts of money trying to mitigate that and building things up, and basically trying to raise the city. But again, all those mitigation costs, or maybe they can stave it off through very expensive engineering works, but those are costs.
Yes. So there we have it. I just wanted to check with Ron to see what information there was about Bangkok. Yeah, big challenges coming up. But that was Ron Coleman on genuine progress indexes or progress indicators. Decide to network. Use every letter you write, every conversation you have, every meeting you attend, every email you send. And remember, even Facebook. To tweet and to express your fundamental beliefs and dreams. Affirm to others the vision of the world you want. Network through thought. Network through action. Network through love. Network through the spirit. You are the center of a network. You are the center of the world. You are a free, immensely powerful source of life and goodness. Affirm it, spread it, radiate it. Think day and night about it, and you will see a miracle happen. The greatness of your own life in a world of big powers, media and monopolies, but of 7.6 billion individuals, networking is the new freedom, the new democracy, a new transparency, and a new form of wholeness and happiness. This originated by Dr. Robert Muller, Chancellor of the World Peace University in Costa Rica, Central America. I invite you to be able to come to greenplanetfm.com, where we have over 400 interviews in our database, which you can readily download and listen to be able to inspire yourself to become the change you want to see in the world and become involved in caring for your children and grandchildren's future. We are also on Facebook, on Green Planet FM and ourplanet.org. Please come and love us. This is Tim Lynch.
And or Lisa Eyre.
And Liz Gunn.
In the spirit of Aroha, wishing you a wonderful week. We look forward to being with you next week. I say, kia kaha and haere rā.